Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Forbidden Dinner Table. I am Alex.
And I am Zach.
And we are coming at you this summer after a little bit of a break. We've got some updates. We're going to hit you with a new episode here. Going to talk about some things that we've been working on, kind of where we're at with all of these topics that we typically discuss in this podcast, and just kind of talk about how the rest of the summer is going to go, the future a little bit, and some other current event ideas. So excited to get going. It's been a little bit. What have you been up to, Zach?
Well, it's just funny. I was going to say too, but before what I get up to, I feel like we're going to round all the bases. We're going to religion, technology, politics. We're going to hit a home run today.
Oh, I like it. Let's hit for the cycle.
That's it for the cycle. What have I been up to? Boy, it's one of those things where when you reflect on, you're like so much, and then they're like, really list it, and you go,
That felt busy. Yeah,
yes, I feel like I've had no free time. Well, one thing I'm sure we're going to get into why we've taken a little bit of a brief hiatus is the music stuff that we've been working on. That has been a fun change of gears. And you know what? It's in the spirit of why we stepped into, and I'm sure we'll talk a little bit more about some of our music projects and endeavors. When we sat down to create this podcast, one of the main things we wanted to do is let's take a moment to create something.
Yes.
Let's put our creativity together. Let's do something and put something out there. And I enjoyed what we were doing with the podcast, but then we just had like another opportunity come up to say, let's flex our creative muscles in a different way, and went in a direction to do things on the music front.
Yeah, totally. So stop just consuming. If you go all the way back to episode 0 and/or 1, I think it was, let's not consume, let's create. So yeah, so for anybody that doesn't know, we've actually been working on putting out some music, and we have one song out and one song that's going to be released pretty soon. You can find them at my YouTube page currently, Alex Martin's YouTube page, and it's under the name Limit None, featuring Zach Martin. And we'd love for everybody to go check it out and listen. We're going to work on getting it up on Spotify too, so that you can listen there. Let's start with that. So that's one of the reasons that the episodes have been a little bit fewer. So number one is it's summer and we're both just busy and we got stuff going on. So this podcast isn't going to go away, but we are kind of bumping the brakes a little bit. Let some things grow and develop, and we can come back and talk about them. But in that time, yeah, you're right. So we've been flexing a different creative muscle, working on some music. We talked a little bit about the music in one of the other episodes, but I'm just curious now that, so in the other one, you were kind of grilling me on the process, but now you've sort of been part of the process. I'm just curious of what your thoughts are as to being part of it, or maybe if anything surprised you, or just kind of talk about being part of the music creation.
Some things that are just coming to mind as I'm really shooting from the hip here. One thing that didn't surprise me is the amount of time it takes, right? Just I learned from film editing, right? It took us, somewhere in the neighborhood of 5 to 6 weeks to put out a 3-minute track, right?
Yeah.
So that,
it's been about 5 to 6 now since that one came out. So we're kind of right on schedule for the next one, but yeah, totally.
Yeah. Something that didn't surprise me is that my least favorite part of the process is laying vocals down and having to listen to yourself.
Same here.
Some things that did surprise me. I felt that when I wanted to write songs, that I wanted to break away from the natural convention of chorus and bridges and verse. But in doing that, I also felt like I was somehow routed back to why that template or format exists.
Well, I will say one interesting thing. So the previous song, which is called Neon Bloom, again, for those that want to go listen to it, and this new one both of them start with the chorus before going to verse. So I thought that was kind of funny that we ended up there with 2 back-to-back songs.
Well, the part of the reason I did that with Neon Bloom is I wanted to stick a little bit to my original of not exactly going verse 1, chorus, verse 2, chorus, bridge, chorus, outro, right? I was like, okay, we'll start with the chorus. But even the way in Neon Bloom that when you listen to it, the last chorus has more to it than the first choruses. Yeah. Because the song sort of builds in that way, and I think we're going there with our second song as well. Yep. I kind of what surprised me is I set out to break the template, but found myself back inside of the template, sort of like gravity like pulled me there, and how the song gets constructed and what's pleasing to the ear and all of these sort of things.
Yeah, one thing about talking to other musicians, and as we're kind of finding out ourselves, you almost have to follow the rules of music and learn them a little bit so that you can learn which ones to break, which I'm sure is true of like filmmaking too, of like the rules are there for a reason, and then you got to get good at the rules so that you know which ones you can kind of bend.
Absolutely.
And be creative. Yeah.
And then when you do break them, it's under a spotlight, and you do it for a very particular reason, and it hopefully makes sense and works well.
I've liked both of these, putting the chorus up front, because it's like a hook immediately. I feel like that gets you into the song. And maybe we'll work on a different one that kind of builds slower in the beginning. But with these, I've just felt like both of them have putting the energy up front has been a benefit and not a bad thing.
Yeah. Some other things that I observed, I understand more now when musicians talk about like, I found the melody first and lyrics second. I've worked in, well, it's interesting because with both of my songs, both of these songs wrote the lyrics first, but then especially on the second song that we're still working on, we changed things to fit a melody we liked a lot better.
So this might be kind of fun. Do you want to talk about how we got to the lyrics of the second song?
Sure. So yeah, we did kind of a songwriting workshop challenge where you and I both picked a topic, and we each had to go write one song for each topic. So we gave ourselves a week to go write 2 songs and come back and talk through those 4 songs. And I wrote 2 songs. You wrote like 4.
I think I wrote 6 actually.
Yeah,
but yeah,
a ton. And how the lyrics. So the topics that we chose, I submitted was cartography, and you chose as your topic
a heist.
And so we both went off our separate ways, and both of us, funnily enough, with cartography, didn't write a lot about cartography, but there were loose ties back to like the concept of maps or space on Earth and things like that.
Nature and both loose interpretations, but certainly. And the reason, really quickly, that I wrote so many, I find myself to not be very good at writing lyrics, so I just wanted to sort of practice more and more and try to see if I could get better at it.
Yeah, and I it's funny how when writing Neon Bloom, I was explaining to you why I put some of the things in certain ways, and you're like, I didn't even like notice why.
Well, things
I
didn't even catch. Yeah, I'm sure there's listeners that wouldn't have caught that, and they're all great. And I'd call you the better lyricist of the two of us. But that was cool to even have you walk through what some of the meanings were behind the lyrics that just made them even cooler.
Yeah. So to get to how we got to the actual lyrics for this one we're working on right now, I wrote my heist song and I wrote my cartography related song, and then I do a lot of biking, a lot of running, and I was out biking and I started singing the first 2 lines from my heist song, and then the main line from my cartography song, and mashing it together into this like remix in my head, and that got stuck in my head, and I was singing it all the time while I was biking. And I'll sing it here because it'll be interesting for people to hear. So the heist song started out, the bank account is empty, but the magazines are loaded.
Which are sweet lines, by the way. Those 2 lines are awesome.
I really like that line. And then one of the lines from my chorus of the cartography song is, not all who wander are lost. So I'm biking around Minneapolis, and if anyone was running, they would have heard me literally out loud, just going around, biking around being like, the bank account is empty and the magazines are loaded. Not all who wander are lost. And so I just thought that was funny that like I was smashing these 2 songs together in my head, and but that got stuck so much there. And then when I kind of sang it for Alex when we were doing it, you were like, no, there's a reason that's stuck in your head.
That melody rocks. Yeah.
That works. And so then we ended up, we couldn't keep those lyrics. So we had to like deconstruct, we had to keep the melody and then construct more cartography, or where the second song is going, words that fit there, and try and keep the melody to the best. And I still like it. I like that we have that melody.
It is funny now going through this, and you might hear a band talk through like their creation of a song, And now I feel like there's even more of like I totally get it, how you would start somewhere and then it goes through revisions and then you wind up with what you have and put out. And now being like, yeah, we have a couple of stories. We've put out a song and a half and we have a couple of those stories too, like totally.
Yeah, I think what speaks volume is that, especially with Neon Bloom, you kind of asked me and I went and explored the space talking with you of like, I'm not 100% married to any of these particular stanzas or these particular verses, but what I want to keep is the theme of this song and like the direction of it, especially kind of tone, because the original tone for Neon Bloom was a little bit darker and like synth and like kind of walking through a city. And when we were actually kind of producing it, it got punky and we had to pull it back from the punk world.
Yeah, and I like it. So as you write lyrics too, you seem to have like a painted picture in your head, which helps me because I've done most of the music writing. But if you can give me not just words on a piece of paper, but go like, close your eyes and picture this, and like that's it, go. Yeah, and that's like, oh, okay, that makes so much more sense to me now versus just handing me a sheet of paper. So that, I think those two things together make it even better, the finished product. Make that even better.
There's almost like a character.
Yeah, but that's cool, and it works.
Yeah, I like it. I'll say to wrap this up, the one thing too that surprised me is now, this shouldn't have surprised me thinking about it, but just how much it has. When I go and listen to other songs now, I hear things and I go, interesting creative choice. Like I see the layers a little bit more, where like I'll just hear something in the background a little bit more, or I'll hear especially like a song, like the words sung in a chorus, and then you'll hear the echo just a little bit in the background, and you go, oh, okay, I can almost see them there tuning it, being like, yeah, if we do the echo this way versus if we do the echo that way. Because I mean, you and I played with just putting our voices through different filters and being like, do we tune it this way or do we tune it that way? Do we tune it this way or do we tune it that way?
Yeah, and I listen to music that way now too.
I joked that we were at the optometrist, so I was like, number 1 or number 2, number 1 or number 3.
I mean, so that's just called A-Bing, and you do it in music all the time. Yeah, where you go, which is better, and you just kind of keep working towards the finished product, which is what takes so much time, is it's like slowly inching it closer to the finish line. But yeah, it's been cool. And I want to keep doing it because it's been fun, and I really like both songs so far, so hopefully others do too. Again, yeah. And you can search on YouTube right now, just type in Limit None Neon Bloom, and you'll be able to hear the song that we're talking about.
All the editing goes to Alex. He is a wizard at the.
Well, I think we're a good team because you give me lyrics and most of a melody, which are my weak parts, but then I can go do music and especially mixing, mastering, editing, and all that stuff. So it comes together well.
Make a good team. I will say too, doing this whole process, and I'm glad we haven't hit it. We've only done 1.5 songs here, but like I also understand how after a band is together for a while and there's creative differences, and then one member would just be like, no, this is how it has to sound, and another one being like, no, you're totally wrong, and then a riff. I can sort of see why when you create something and you want a lot of ownership and you care about it sounding this way, like the compromises that need to be made in an album for a band.
Yeah, totally. Especially I could see as we slid into the too punk realm for Neon Bloom, if one of us was like, no, it's perfect that way, and the other one was saying no, I totally could see. Luckily, we were both like, nope, that's not the sound that we want to achieve. So we never really had that issue. I don't think we ever did. But I could see how it would happen.
There's a few times where you were like, I really think it should be this way, and I was like, 6 in one hand, half a dozen in the other. I don't care. Like they sound very similar to me. Like, go with what you think is the best there, which is good that we have. That's how we've navigated this maze. So yeah,
that's been good. So we're gonna keep doing that. Next song should be coming out hopefully sometime this month. We'll see. We'll keep everyone updated.
Yeah.
All right, let's move right along here. So the other thing that I really wanted to take this time to talk about, we've hit a lot of different themes throughout our episodes: politics, religion, technology. I just wanted to get a general feel for where you're at mentally on some of these things. Is there anything that's bugging you that you're trying to dig further into? Are there other things that you're like, you know what, I haven't even been thinking about that recently? Any general thoughts, or else I can go first if you would prefer.
I'll tee up something small here, and maybe this will segue us over into some fun places. Otherwise, we can have a brief conversation, and then you can tee us up. Yeah. Kind of off air, you and I have had some conversations, and I think you asked a really good question of like, what are both the left and the right doing in order to move rights forward? And not talk about like rights getting taken away, but how do we get like more rights, basically? And I've been thinking about this idea of like just pushing is the wrong word. It's like offering a ton of choices to individuals, and to be like, the choices are all yours. Like, you can do what you want here, but also balancing that with an act of like, if we think some things are harmful, or people believe something's really harmful, is there a role to like step in and do something there? And I mean, I guess this is sort of, I'm talking a little bit about like libertarian, but like as I watch tobacco move up to 21 years old, right, and things like that, and it's like, we're moving the lever in some areas to say, no, those rights aren't appropriate there. But then in other areas, exploring like, we want as many rights as possible, and you go do your own thing. I'm just trying to, that's something that I've been thinking a lot about, is just pushing things down to the individual level versus the state level versus the federal level. In a way, I'll sum this up with, what is the role of government?
Oh, God. Yeah. Well, so that's an interesting example, too, because I think the libertarian view would be like, if someone wants to have tobacco, let them.
Right.
But that one, and alcohol, and even as marijuana, as we slide into that, gets into, there do need to be rules to protect kids.
Absolutely. I mean, there needs to be rules to protect others with drinking and driving. I mean, like, yeah, there's reasons for a lot of this sort of stuff. So I'm not advocating for that. I'm just using it as a bit of an example of like where rights are getting pushed down versus up in areas.
Yeah, that's a good example though, because I think with those types of things, you could even throw guns in there if we want to go down that road. A fully formed adult can make that decision. And that would almost be my answer to the question. Now the conversation shifts to what's a fully formed and functioning adult. So, you know, is it a 12-year-old? No, I think most people would agree no. So we say, okay, well, those options aren't available to a 12-year-old, but a fully formed, functioning adult, all of those options are available. And that's, I guess, how my mind works through those types of things.
What about
those
like,
particular examples?
I'm going to throw you a real hard curveball. What about like somebody with traumatic brain injury? Do they do they get the access to tobacco, even if they're over 21 or 25?
That's a good question. Yeah, now, I mean, of course, there's all these different individual cases that I mean, it's a case-by-case basis, I guess. I don't quite know. How functioning are they?
Well, I say my answer would be yes, just because trying to make a line the other way would get...
I lean yes, but I also... Yeah, I mean, I lean yes, but if they're so injured that they don't know what they're doing,
right,
then it's a little bit different.
That's true. Does anyone know what they're doing, Alex? Sorry, we'll reel back in.
Oh boy, yeah.
But yeah, so to back it up, like what I've been thinking about is just this like the future of our rights. We'll put it that way.
I'll say, if I can interject for a second too. Please. This one's weird if you look at abortion too, because there's some places, I forgot which state it was going to have like children. So think like a 14-year-old. If they got pregnant, they'd have to go through a psych evaluation to basically like get approved for an abortion. And the comment was, isn't this backwards? Shouldn't a 14-year-old be going through an evaluation to raise a child?
Right.
Like, it was an interesting, like, whoa, yeah, that's a good point. Like, you're only attacking part of the problem here. And of course, all the abortion advocates or people against it have a side on that particular issue. And I go, I think you're all wrong. And we're actually looking at that particular circumstance incorrectly. The whole thing needs like an evaluation to see what's best for everybody involved.
Yeah, I mean, I've heard this through not the psych evaluation, but just claims of like 14's not old enough to drink, not old enough to sign up for military. You can't vote. If you want to get into the transgender arguments, like they don't have the wherewithal to make these decisions about the long-term impacting for puberty blockers and stuff like that. But then they say absolutely, like it's
but you can raise a child.
To raise a child.
It's like, wait a second.
But I mean, abortion gets tricky there because the alternative is, well, okay, what are we going to do about the potential for life that's in this equation?
I get it,
right.
I'm saying
it's a very difficult place, but I've heard that pointed out before in the past of like, hey, don't we have some kind of inconsistencies here?
As a bit of a joke too, there were some people saying that people that get abortions should get the death penalty, and I was like, doesn't sound very pro-life to me, guys. Like,
so pro-life will kill you.
Yeah, it's like, wait a second. I think you've lost sight of like the actual what's actually put in front of you here. So, anyways, those are two asides. But
what have you been? What's been rattled around in your head on the political front?
So, so politically, I still think everybody sucks. I really hate both parties. I really hate both parties at this point. I mean, you've got, so if to cite examples, I suppose, we had a tragedy here in Texas, in Uvalde, and one side wants to push gun control and gun rights, which is, I understand that people are saying a bit of a slippery slope and that people have a right to have firearms. I get it. But the other side's solutions, without addressing any of that, frankly, were preposterously stupid. So I hate what's coming from the traditional right. Everybody's dunking on Ted Cruz for saying that all schools need to have one entrance and exit door and armed security guards. And it's like, dude, you want to send your kid to a school that's a prison? And if I reject that premise, I don't think kids should have to go to prison to learn. And if someone were to say, well, that's what we have to do to ensure that we have guns, I would say, nah, then I reject the whole gun premise, because it's more important for kids to go to like a school and not a prison. So I've hated what's coming out of their side, especially around that topic, but also around, so you brought up who's pushing rights and who's taking away rights. It seems to me, please write in, people, if you disagree, the traditional right is very focused on taking things away, whereas the traditional left is focused on giving more rights. So I would tend to skew left, I guess, in that regard. But just kind of, I don't know, I feel like I've risen above it in a weird way of like, I'm not rooting for either team. I'm just sort of watching them play ball objectively. And that's kind of where I'm at. To criticize the left, there's a lot going on with the Biden administration who frankly aren't doing enough to solve some of these problems I think that we have now. Whether or not he created them, which a lot of people would say this is all Biden's fault, and I don't agree with that. But he's also not doing anything to fix it, which is his fault. So there's that side of it too.
Yeah, it's funny when Biden won the presidential election, I sort of at the time I was like, okay, this is good. America needs to wean themselves off the crazy cocktail that has been Trump. We just need,
which was true,
a super vanilla president. And now a couple of years later, I'm like, man, this is really vanilla.
This is too vanilla. Do
this
something.
Is so vanilla.
Well, and he's too busy blaming Putin for all the inflation, which I'm just like, what? Like the Putin price hike. Have you heard the Putin price hike?
No,
like, that's the reason gas is expensive. That's the reasons your food prices go down. It's like, dude, no, it's not. We know that it's not.
I would say yes.
Shut up.
I would say yes and no. I think this like mental model I have of like when there's a problem or a conversation, I picture a table and I picture seats at the table to be like, okay, the problem is inflation. Putin gets one seat. I won't blame Putin. I'll just say the Russian-Ukraine war. Now, if you want to draw a line to Putin off of that, but the Russian-Ukraine war gets a seat. The super big demand after the pandemic gets another seat at the table.
Supply chain issues.
Yeah, supply chain issues gets another seat at the table.
Printing trillions and trillions of dollars gets a seat at the table.
Right.
That's true.
So when people say, well, it's not this or it is this, I go like, yeah, but it's a seat at the table. Like, let's talk about all the things at the table here.
I like that. But then the next question is really, what's the important one? What are you doing to fix it? And the answer so far has been, I don't know.
Well, that's a little, like anybody on the right who critiques Biden, I go, okay, what would be your proposal for changes here?
Yeah.
And if they have good proposals, I go, great. I like your idea of like you're just watching them play ball.
Yeah, I'm just objectively watching two teams that I have no allegiance to.
Yeah, and I constantly go around internally asking myself, what would it take for me to change to the other side on this topic? What I want to live, with beliefs that are evidence-based, based in data. So I ask myself, what is the data that I would need to see to make me flip to the other side?
Yeah, that's a good question too. But yeah, that's kind of where I'm at with politics and some of the recent events.
You brought up the school shooting in Texas, and we were having a conversation with our buddy Nate, somebody who's been on the podcast, about. I thought it was a question that got kind of stuck in my head, and was thinking about days later of like, what is an appropriate reaction to a tragedy of this level? And I kind of sadly found myself justifying like, okay, an appropriate reaction would be feeling incredibly sad and spending the day like going through this rabbit hole of news articles and things like that. Like that, it seems like a semi-appropriate reaction, as well as hearing about it on the news, saying that's unfortunate, and then moving on with your day, because we've had so many tragedies and nothing has happened that it's tough to think like, well, this is going to change anything. So if you dwell on that a lot, that feels like, this is going to sound sad, but like counterproductive, because we've been through this race. So that also feels like a semi-appropriate response. So I'm left with this main question that we were talking about, like, what is an appropriate reaction to a tragedy like this?
You mean it's not tweet thoughts and prayers and then go on with your day?
That could be a response.
Yeah, well, this is tough because there's a couple different levels of reaction, though, too, because there's people that will hear the news and say that's unfortunate. And I mean, people that live in, well, for example, you live in Minnesota, right? It's like, what am I going to do about it? There's nothing you could vote for other than national election that's going to have any effect on it.
Yeah.
So, okay. Now, that doesn't mean you can't organize like a GoFundMe to help the families, or and there's people that will do that, and I think that's great. That's actually really helping, rather than saying, T's and P's, I'm out.
T's and please.
T's and P's. So, yeah, so there's that. There's people like Matthew McConaughey has gone to the White House and give a whole speech on. I think that's great, and I think for someone with a platform, that's a stellar response. For people like you and me. So I do live in Texas, so this is like one thing I'll consider more as we move into midterms and further elections, is to just take an extra look at what people's platform is surrounding this. I'm not really a single issue voter, so that doesn't do anything there, but it's another like, let me check that really quick. Maybe I wouldn't have looked before. For other people, yeah, I mean, there's really nothing you can do about it. I don't know.
Here's kind of where I landed, right? Like, I took a moment to think about how unfortunate it is, right? And acknowledge how desensitized one can feel, right? Like with like tragedy after tragedy.
Totally.
Then I kind of went and just did a little bit of reading on gun ownership and gun statistics and things like that, and tried my best to educate myself on the situation. And my goal moving forward is to just have patient, compassionate conversations with people, and most importantly, do my best to call out misinformation. So it's
I like the last one especially.
I'm not like trying to make a claim and push it heavy forward, but I almost want to like root for the team, do my best to help other people come up with claims by just squashing misinformation and pushing towards the truth, trying to get people most closest to like accurate facts.
I like the last one. Well, and I've sat and thought about how I would handle this if I was President Alex or King Alex. And so, yeah, I mean, I've kind of thought about that, which leads me into maybe which politicians I'll support in the future.
Yeah.
Again, I'm not a single issue voter, but yeah, I don't know. There's that. Or I like, going and talking to people, but also trying to listen and understand all sides of the argument. It is complicated. And for anybody that says it's not, is frankly lying. Did you listen to the Sam Harris episode right after that? It was all about guns?
Not yet. I have not.
It was good, and it was an interesting conversation that didn't solve anything. And Sam even jokingly in there is like, well, we pretty much ended up right where we thought we would, which is we haven't really gone anywhere in the last hour. Like, we just kind of walked around a problem, tried to poke at it from a different angles, and they both kind of were like, that's about all we can do right now. It's very complicated. Yeah. But there's a couple laws that I would like to see passed through. But again, I can't do that. That's for the people on Capitol Hill to figure out, like.
Yeah. I think what I've been saying to a lot of people is we need to have a really difficult conversation about guns and mental health. That is complicated. Before we even have that conversation, I think there are a few steps we should take legislatively for guns, right? Like of just closing gun show loophole, some more what I would call common sense, like background, like more universal background check.
Safe storage. I like that one.
Yeah, like I would say those three things are things that we should do before we even have a conversation about like red flags, which I think is an important thing we should talk about, but it's more sensitive about taking away rights. Now we're back to like rights and what your access to rights are. And it may be that we have this conversation and we say, yeah, we should absolutely do that. But to me, it's like, we need to sit down and do this. But before we even sit down and do this, I think we should do
something. It's sad when
things.
Just something, I think, would make a lot of people happy. And I think they were joking about this on Breaking Points today, actually. There's a bipartisan push to do something.
Yeah.
And it's funny that just that word, something, is more than has ever really been done in the last 20 years, which is just like all the American people want is something. And then we can keep pushing and see where we want to go with it. But like, if you can just curb the margins a little bit, that's something.
Yeah.
Which is, it could be one of the three things that we talked about, because those seem pretty popular. But yeah,
I think about like, well, imagine if automatic weapons were legal today. Would we have a bunch of people like making Second Amendment arguments to be like, no, you can't take away automatic weapons? It's
That's
just
a good question.
It's I know older generations say this of just like the political discourse and conversation that happens today seems like no compromise, and it's difficult to watch.
Yeah, I think that's part of the problem though too, is that people aren't willing to work together. It's all about
we don't
their
have
team.
mavericks like John McCain out there crossing the aisle. I say that sort of jokingly, but I did appreciate and respect what a lot of when McCain did work in a bipartisan effort. So.
Or Tulsi was big about that too.
Mm-hmm.
There needs to be more people like that, I think, that are willing to be like, no, I'm here to legislate and do my job. A big problem is too many of them are worried about what their next job is already.
Yeah.
Or how their investments are doing. And it's like, that's not why you're there.
Yeah, the problem is the individuals who get elected and immediately start focusing on getting reelected and forget the point of why they were originally elected.
Agreed. Yeah. So that's politics. Do you have anything else on politics?
No, I don't think so.
Okay. So
I'll
the
take
other
a seat
one
next to you in the stands and watch the Dems versus
Yeah,
the
Cubs. And I've tried to talk to family members this way too about being like, I'm kind of above it. Don't talk to me like, when you're talking about your football team or whatever, you say things like "we won," and I go, don't say "we won" to me. I don't want to hear it.
Yeah, the one thing I would caution is when you say that you're above it, I get what you mean, but to somebody it can seem like you're being like, I'm way better than all. Like I'm
not better. I mean, I'm quite literally sitting on top of it, looking down at it.
Yes, and but just some people may interpret that as like,
that's fair. Oh, that's beneath me.
I'm better than the American political system.
Lord Martin has no time for these silly things. Yeah. Okay. So that's politics. The other one, religion, has been kind of in my head recently, and I'm in a really interesting, kind of a similar spot with this one too. We've talked a lot about religion, what we think is real, what we've struggled with. We've sort of both landed on being possibilians. I have never been more comfortable with the idea that everything we were taught growing up is incorrect. And I think part of what tipped me over the edge, so there's kind of two things recently. Well, three. One is watching Ricky Gervais's newest stand-up special. And he is, by all definitions, an atheist. And he makes some comments in the special about just being like, I don't pray. Why would I do that? I don't believe in any of it. And I was like, oh, I guess that is just a stance you can have. Like, you're actually not the crazy person.
he has a super interesting. That whole line actually, I think, was probably the best part of his special Super Nature.
Yes.
Which was, people ask him like, "Oh, are you an atheist?" He goes, "Yeah." Like, "Do you pray at all?" He goes, "No." And they say, well, shouldn't you just like try just in case there is or something like that? And his response is, would you put garlic above your door just in case there's vampires? Which is a brilliant,
such a good answer
comment. And I have thought like that is you can't get better than that.
That exchange tipped me over to go, oh, you know what? He's actually the most grounded one by saying all of that. And we've texted on this too, but it's interesting that people feel like the burden of proof is on them as an atheist. And I think that's backwards.
Well, I think because there's this misconception that atheism is like a set of beliefs, when the truth is atheism is just denying something. I mean,
or like
Sam
the
Harris
default.
Yeah. Well, default is another good way to put it. Sam Harris has another great line that's up there with the kind of hanging up garlic, which he says, atheism as much as a belief system as not playing badminton is a sport.
Yes. Yeah. And that perfectly sums up, like, for you to convince me, it's not my job to tell you not to do something. It's your job to tell me to do something. So it's weird how we've tricked ourselves into feeling like the atheists are the guilty ones, or like the ones that need to explain themselves. And I'm like, no. That's backwards.
I think that just comes partially with how much morality is tied up in like moralities that sort of we all agree. Not we all agree. I shouldn't say that. That a lot of people appreciate and lean into the moralities from Christianity, as well as having a Western society rooted in Judeo-Christian framework.
Yeah, which is fine. And there's still, don't get me wrong, there's still like good things that come out of every religion. But I have no problem looking at the whole book and being like, nah.
Right. Yeah, that's kind of where I'm at. Is like, let's take the good things. Let's reject the bad things. Or what I say to people that are Christian that I'm having conversations with, I say, do you think slavery is good? To which everyone has said no. And I said, there are parts in the Bible that talk about the logistics of buying, selling slaves. Or it's definitely not like denouncing slavery. It's talking about it, and you can debate the level of it, inviting it in. But I say, do you think slavery is bad? And they say, yeah, I think it's bad. I go, okay, I'm interested in that move right there, where you pointed to something in the Bible and said, this is bad. Because you could have taken an argument to say, well, it's in the Bible, so it's good because this is a divine work.
Yeah.
But there's some layer inside of you that is making a call that is not good. Let's talk about that layer and all the things that go into that layer, because there's other things. I mean, I'm guessing in today's modern world, we don't think it is acceptable to stone a woman if she's getting married and not a virgin on her wedding night.
Right.
There's something inside of you that says, I can't do that. Let's talk about that invisible thing inside of you.
Yeah, I think that is a more interesting conversation. And to clarify, I don't consider myself an atheist. If you've listened to the previous episodes, I'm a possibilian. Because another question is like, we don't believe that there's some greater power. And I would always go, I didn't say that. There could be. I'm not ruling it out. But I also think that whatever greater power it is doesn't care if I eat fish on Friday. Or, like that just seems silly to me. Like this all-knowing being cares about that. Like it starts to kind of break in my head. And but the point is, I've never been more comfortable with that approach.
This reminds me a little bit of a great Voltaire quote, which is, uncertainty is an uncomfortable position, but certainty is an absurd one.
Ooh, yeah, that makes sense. So the other two examples, I said there were three things that got me here.
Yeah.
The other one is thinking more about, so I'm going to try not to go down a rabbit hole here, but like what part of me is actually me? And some would boil this. I'm gonna not, but some would boil this down to like the soul versus your body. And so there's parts of your life that you're controlling, and there's parts that you have control over. There's parts of your life that you don't. And so I'm just trying to kind of explore why that is and what that means. And I think I don't like the religious explanation, I guess, is sort of where it gets me. I don't think that's the whole picture.
This is taking me to an exchange, which is, you are not your mind or your body. but you are potentially your mind and your body.
Sort of. But even
But I
that,
also know that you're getting into something else, which is there almost like there's mind, there's body, and then I just have like a blank
something
space
else.
here.
Yeah.
And you're like, okay, am I this observer? Am
Yes.
I this?
Yes. Yeah.
Am I just along for the ride in a way?
Am I just kind of along for the ride? And then through, I don't think we talked about it on here, but there's been things where then you show up somewhere else.
Well,
and maybe
so
you have memories of the previous body or something like that. So it just kind of...
That's where I kind of was going of like, if there is an experience after you die, and so if there's mind, there's body, and then what I'll call underscore, right? This is sort of blank space
I like
to
it.
be able to find. And then when you die and mind and body melt away and all that's left is underscore, well, yeah, you're going to have an absolutely completely different view of things because your experience is now not tainted by earthly desires or limited memory or any of this sort of stuff. You're just left as this underscore, which gets a mind. I can't even say mind. This explosion of perspective because you've stripped away mind and body.
Yeah, and I think the reason I reject at least like Christianity's take on that, being a soul and you wind up in heaven, there's evidence, and I'll loosely say evidence, some of it is anecdotal, about people coming back or having knowledge of like a prior life that they shouldn't have really had. And so that would mean like, okay, well then that one didn't go to heaven. So can you explain that? Like, I
like to think this might tick some people off, but I'm just going to say it anyways. I like to think if there is an afterlife and there is like a deity or something like that, and you get up there and he's like checking notes, or she's checking notes, and they're like, oh, you're a Christian. You're like, yeah, I went to mass every Sunday. He's like, oh, man, that legend just won't die. Like he like hates the story. He's like, oh man, that one's a tough one to get rid of.
That would be funny, yeah. And we've read some near-death experiences where people encounter this godlike being and sort of come to the realization that it doesn't care what you were worshiping or who you were praying to. Is like, it's so above everything that that doesn't mean anything.
In a way, you like can't even use language or words to try to even start putting it into a box. And
totally. Yeah. So anyway, all of those different things sort of got me to where I am now, which is just being really comfortable going, I don't know, but I don't think that's the answer.
Sorry, the first one was the Ricky Gervais special. The second one was this.
The third one's
an observation.
Third one's a bit of a joke. But I've gone down a couple rabbit holes about the fourth dimension and all this stuff, and we don't need to talk about that. But the joke is sort of like, wouldn't it have been cool if there was something in the commandments that like nobody at the time knew what it meant? If like commandment number 10 is like, don't play your iPod too loud, and people were like, what does this mean? But the God would have known, right, that was coming down the line. So that would have been awesome if there was one that was like, we're still waiting to know what this means. It's kind of like in Don't Look Up, when they're like, how am I going to die? And they go, well, it says you get eaten by whatever. And they go, what's that? And they go, we don't know yet. And then at the end of the movie, that's what happens. And he's like, I guess that's whatever that's called. That would have been cool. And so there's some things that science has gone so far that religion just like doesn't have an explanation for it, to which I find odd.
Yeah. I think about like how many lives would have been saved if just a few passages in the Bible talked about germ theory. Wash your hands. Yeah. That could have saved millions of lives.
Commandment 11, rethink that ticket to the Titanic. People are like, what? What? That's weird. And then like, wait a second, here it is. Yeah, shouldn't there be something in there like that? Like,
yeah, well, if you did that, then everything would be named. Well, no, I was gonna say everything would be renamed the Titanic, but then everyone would be like, wait, no, I don't want tickets.
Oh, that's a good point. Yeah, they take that and go, that's a pretty good name, and it would get lost in the shuffle, I suppose. But yeah, germ theory, something where it's like, well, they hadn't figured it out at the time. It's like, yeah, but I'm pretty sure God would have known about it, right? The way you've described him. So he's not letting them in on that little clue. Like, yeah, I don't know. So that big ball of fun is number 3, why I'm like, you know what? I think I'm good.
I can tell you why I'm still searching. I'm still reading. I'm still having conversations with individuals. I just had a conversation last week with a monk, Catholic monk. what I feel like the answer is somewhere in between science and religion, which is why I land in possibilianism, right? Of like, yeah, let's explore this. Let's not define anything so sharply that we've written ourselves into a corner of saying nothing exists or anything like that. But where I find myself at ease with Christianity is when I take a step back and look at the whole picture of God having some type of grievance or problem with humanity, right? That there's infractions happening because of these sins, and his best answer is to create an individual, his son, torture, kill to clear the slate. I say, you're all-knowing, you're all-powerful, you're benevolent if you exist. This is the best that you can do. Like,
I've never thought about that.
Like, really? Like, I can come up with a ton better, like, ways you could have done this. Right. That doesn't involve creating a following that celebrates a human sacrifice every Sunday.
That's a good point.
And I mean, if you really want to get like aggressive with this, sometimes when I'm having conversations with people, I say, if this is the best that God can do, I'm not impressed.
Yeah, that's a good point. I've never thought about it like that. But it's funny. So what popped into my head here too is like, I can say with the benefit of like retrospect how it could have gone better. And if someone has a problem with that, you should be like, well, God should have had whatever the opposite of retrospect is.
Yeah.
Been able to figure it out ahead of time.
Yeah.
I've never thought about that. That is interesting.
I will say I won't go through a lot of like in depth of what I talked with the monk about, but I did get one really interesting answer to a kind of question that I posed, which is I was asking if God is omnipotent and knows the future, he can't also have free will. Because if God knows what he's doing tomorrow at noon, he has no choice in the matter, right? Of like, he knows exactly what he's doing tomorrow at noon. To which the monk sort of said back, well, does tomorrow ever actually come for God? And I said, well, what do you sort of mean by that? And he says, here's the best analogy that he had heard it described, which I think this is a really cool analogy, and I'm working about how to kind of take this analogy forward. He said, picture a race car track, like a racetrack.
Mm-hmm.
And how you sort of experience time as somebody in the universe is driving on the race car track, and it goes around and you're experiencing the track sort of one moment in time or something. You can go through the track, but while you're on the track, all you sort of see is that moment that you're touching the track. To be God is like being in a watchtower where you can see the whole, like away from it up high, and you can see the whole track all at once. But the race car driver is only touching the track and experiencing it at one point in time around it. So that was sort of the analogy he gave of like, does tomorrow ever actually come for God? And that sort of sidesteps the problem of, does God know what he's doing tomorrow at noon? And the problem with omnipotence versus free will. Now, does this solve everything? No. But I thought it was a very interesting answer to the question.
So they're saying it's a bit wibbly wobbly, timey-wimey. But my answer too would be like, where are you getting this from? Are you making this up?
No, he had explained it to him. It had been explained to him in his...
Okay, fair. But I guess that I know there's things like that in religion too, where I'm just like, what book did you read? Because I never got that in. But I don't know. I'm sure there's lots of those corridors where they're like, well, actually, it's this. And you go, well, but where did that come from?
But this is where I think Catholics and other sects would make the argument, which is why Protestantism is wrong. Because you can't just take the Bible as a book. They would say you need the church. The church is the critical part that helps you decipher the Bible.
That's fine.
Carries traditions. Right, to which then we sort of got into the conversation around, but the church has made mistakes. And then the common answer I hear back is, the church hasn't made mistakes, humans in the church have made mistakes. And I say, what's the difference?
I would say,
the church is a collection of individuals.
Yeah, it also says a lot to me that you have people in the church. I mean, you have priests. So within a church in any small town, literally the person there that's closest to this religion and God doing things as if he doesn't believe them is a bit of a red flag.
Yeah, but that's you can't build that's the problem with religion, because then under that same guise you could sort of take, I know that we sort of just make comments about atheism and things like that, but if an atheist murdered somebody, then that would give them the same sort of, I think, argument to say, well, look, lacking moral values, everyone just goes and murders. You can't take one case within this group and say that thing is speaking for it overall. I would say, though, when you have decisions at sort of a papal level of like putting Galileo under house arrest for the theory of heliocentrism, that wasn't just like a priest saying Galileo's going to go to hell. It was like the church as a whole making a collective comment on his findings and saying his findings were incorrect when objectively they were correct.
I'm saying things like committing suicide or the children fiasco is actually like two things at once, where I go, you're so close to this stuff and you're basically throwing it all out the window. That's just a red flag for me, is all that I'm saying.
Yeah.
If there's anyone here that should believe this stuff the most, it's probably you. And you clearly don't. What are we all doing here? That's all.
Well, it goes back to, and I don't know if we've talked about this on air, of the Pope's flip-flopping about whether or not animals get into heaven, too.
I think we have. Yeah.
So there's some background there where
who got that wrong? The church? The Pope?
One Pope said,
God?
Yes, animals go to heaven. Another Pope said, no, animals don't have souls. They don't go to heaven. And then the next Pope was like, yeah, you can see your dog in heaven. It's like, what are we doing here?
Yeah, that's exactly.
Who do I got to pay to be? Who do I got to pay to be able to see my dog in heaven? Let's go back to the old.
Yeah, that's an example
church.
of where I just go, it kind of sounds like you're just making this up as you go.
Yeah.
But which again,
it's tough.
simply a red flag.
Because I see people wanting to do such good and living with such conviction that it even invited in me concerns of like, do I have this wrong? Because I don't hold any beliefs to the level. I mean, like martyrs in a way. Not saying that martyrs is a good reason to believe, because we've seen people fly planes into towers with different belief systems.
Any reason.
But it's just wild to think that somebody could have this like quote unquote vision, right? Let's just say like Joan of Arc, and then we'll throw their life into chaos and stuff.
We're an interesting example because we can take that on such a smaller scale and still wouldn't do anything about it. Because we've talked about like going out and protesting, and you and I are like, yeah, there really isn't anything that would like get me in the street. Let alone like light myself on fire in front of something for a cause.
Yeah.
It's like, yeah, I won't even like leave my house for, this other thing. So I don't know.
And at one point in time, I think I had some concern where I was like, man, do I not hold any beliefs like to a level of depth that is noteworthy or kind of like, to be admired? But then I realized that my like pursuit of the truth, I hold very deeply, right? And like I will stand up and
that's true.
You and I will debate people. We will have conversations. We'll do our best to understand and try very hard to admit when we're wrong, right? Like it's to me, this pursuit of truth, by putting myself in a camp of possibilianism, it opens myself up to try to actually pursue the truth to the best of my ability.
I like that almost being our mission statement too, is like pursuit of truth. Just throughout my life, whatever that may mean, and standing up for that almost as my thing that I care about the most. I'll also say, if there's people out there that it makes them so happy to go and fight for some right that they believe in, power to them. Great. It's that just doesn't make me happy, so I don't do it. Now, there can be a really bad idea, and you go, there can be a lot of collateral damage, which becomes a bad thing no matter what the right is. But if you want to get out in the street and protest for something, so long as that's where that ends, do it. Great. Yeah. If that's what makes you happy.
You know what's interesting is because you and I don't subscribe to these kind of general labels of like, we're not a Democrat or Republican, we're not a Christian or a Hindu or any of those sort of things. It's kind of hard to attack us by bringing up something that we like, the history of Democrats doing something wrong, or like, let's say I was a Christian and somebody could come up to me and like talk to me about pre-sex scandals or the Crusades and stuff like that. And that's kind of a hit against your identity. I almost don't have anything that you can sort of bring at me because I don't subscribe to a group label. I mean, one person, a friend of mine had commented of like, yeah, well, you're like a moderate. That doesn't stand for anything. And I was like, it stands for everything. I'm trying to look at everything and make the best decision there. And he's like, yeah, but there's nothing there to go after.
Yeah,
and I was like, okay, interesting.
That could be the critique. I like coming out of this episode saying, well, I stand for like the pursuit of truth. But I guess there is a critique in saying like you just go which way the wind blows or something like that. But I guess the pursuit of truth would be opposed to that.
Correct. And I would say what's interesting is when you start talking about the pursuit of truth is now we have to start breaking down, and this is the stuff that you and I love to talk about, well, how do we know when something is true? What is the system for best being able to stake beliefs or facts down on?
That's interesting to me. Yeah. By the way, to go back to what I was saying before, that does make me happy, so I do it.
Right. And now we get to talk about fun stuff like non-falsifiable hypothesis or cognitive bias and all of these sort of... Oh, let's ring the jargon bell. Let's bring jargon bell back.
You said fun stuff and 30 people just rolled their eyes. But I get it.
Yeah, the non-falsifiable hypothesis is you can't put forward a hypothesis that is impossible to prove wrong. To me, if we're gonna pile on religion here, like the concept that prayer works, right? And then if I give a bunch of examples of prayer not working, and they say, well, that's just sort of God's divine plan, or that's how it was supposed to go.
Yeah.
If I just gave you a bunch of examples of your hypothesis breaking, you seem to now have switched your hypothesis to not even be falsifiable. What are we doing here? What is the claim? What is a claim even if it can't be proven wrong?
What are we doing here?
What are we doing here? Time is a flat circle. Is that Bill Clinton apparently being Matthew McConaughey?
That was Bill covering Matthew McConaughey.
What are we even doing here?
Yeah.
All right.
Good deal.
All right.
Hey, we're at about time, so not bad for our first episode after a bit of a break.
Yeah, this was good. It's like riding a bike.
It kind of is. So to reiterate, too, we probably won't be doing an episode every week like we were for a while. So over the summer, it'll be a bit sporadic. We are going to be still working on some music. We've got trips and things coming up. So as the fall kicks back in, we might get more of a weekly routine. But yeah, until then, we're just going to kind of do what we feel like.
That's a great way to sum it up. We'll continue pursuing truth, and what we're going to do and what I would advise people to do, take it, use it.
Take it, use it, live. We're going to keep exploring the spaces. I also wanted to close today by saying this because I don't know that I've ever said it on the air. But Zach, you will recognize it. I started touching on it at the end here, but a piece of advice that I like to think I came up with is to, for anybody, find what makes you happy and do more of it.
This was a fun one.
Vote Green AI. Good night, everybody.
Good night.